see the queen physically. If you see embryos or eggs, you know that she's been there within the last 3 days, because that's how long the embryo phase lasts.
See, I'm seeing things that look like the actual larvae in there. Are those unsealed?
Yes. So that you see first instar larva,
Yeah.
right in there. Those are the first stage, first larval stage, and they're older larvae down here.
Yeah, that aren't covered yet.
Yeah, they look like little caterpillars. Okay.
How often would you do this inspection?
I see those easy. I'm not seeing the grain of rice easy.
Let me.
I don't know why.
Let me try to mark the cells that have the eggs in them for you to make it easier.
Okay. Oh yeah.
So the first instar larval stage, which is the first larval stage after the embryo, it literally, unless you have acute vision, it looks like pale blue fluid in the bottom of the cell, because the caterpillar, the larva, is so small that she's really, really tiny. That's harder to see than an egg.
Okay.
All right, so let's see. Try to tick one or two of these cells and make a mark on them so you can know where to look.
Are you getting the feeling that?
No, thankfully not
What's
yet.
that?
Just my hair keeps bothering me.
Got it.
Your hair keeps bothering you? Sorry.
I saw the big ones.
Those
and I
two?
saw that
Those
fluid
two.
stuff that he was talking about, the blue looking, but I never saw the rice grain or anything standing up. That I didn't see.
And we'll probably have another opportunity before the day's out.
So they do it on both sides.
And as far as
Yeah, so the queen is rearing brood on both sides of this comb, or the bees are rearing brood on both sides of this comb. The queen, there's the queen right there. You see her?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Big.
Oh, the wing.
And the
Big.
Mr. Where's she now?
Did you see her?
That's her.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
The longer one.
That's a damn good eye.
Because it's important for
Yeah,
me to
kidding.
be able to identify those little rice grain ones when I'm doing this new nuke, right? That's what
Well,
I'm
you
looking
can
for.
assure yourself that you've had a queen within the last 72 hours if you see one, right? You don't have to actually go in and find the queen. Although I encourage you to always look for the queen.
So are these
You
the
know-
Italian bees then?
This is a bee weaver queen.
A bee weaver queen. Okay.
Hmm. And ours is, it's kind of a misnomer to say that we're selling bee weaver nukes or bee weaver queens and then Italian queens or Italian nukes, because they're bee weavers breed is mostly Italian. Apis mellifera ligustica is the subspecies. It's just got a different blend of traits and some contribution from the other 4 major subspecies of bees too.
She's not
All right.
liking you chasing you around.
Well, she's been amazingly tolerant actually.
Really?
Because sometimes
And you
they'll
can
really
actually
run. Okay, and here we have a drone. Okay, so that's the daddy bee. You see the difference?
I've got a bigger
I can't see it.
Sorry.
back.
Much bigger, fatter, bigger eyes,
okay.
bigger thorax, bigger abdomen, longer wings,
Sort of black and woolly.
and the color can vary. The drones from this colony would appear to be mostly dark. They don't have to be, and you can see the difference between the color of the queen and the color of the drone. And the drone is actually a flying gamete. Only has 1 set of chromosomes.
Oh.
And so it's really a representation of one of the 2 haplotypes of the queen. All right, so let me pass this back around again. And again, I had ticked a couple of cells that have eggs in them if you want to try to find them again. And let's, like that. You got to kind of move it around until you get it at the right focal length. And then you can see right down there in the bottom of the cell. You got that? So with a comb like that that's got solid brood, top to bottom, side to side, the population of this colony will double or more within the next week or 10 days.
Really?
As those bees hatch out. Okay, and don't despair if you don't find the eggs on that one. We have other opportunities.
Now, what did you say about the number of bees?
I was saying that as that brood on that comb begins to hatch, as it will very quickly, and also the brood on this comb, the population of bees will grow rapidly, because there are more baby bees about to emerge than there are adult bees in this nuke right now.
Really?
So the way it works developmentally, and this is something that's important to know because you can often evaluate the condition of your colony if you understand. You know what? Let me grab that queen up there. She about fell. I don't want to lose her. We'll put her back in the hive. I apologize. I didn't turn my ringer off. So we have another chance for you to look at multiple stages of brood. And there are lots of eggs in this area on this comb, okay? Around the margins. So typically the way the queen begins to lay when she can is in a spiral pattern, starting in the middle and spiraling outward. So you usually have an age gradient from the middle of the comb to the edge of the comb.
What is this? It's been there a long time, hasn't it?
What?
This right here.
That's a brace comb. That's just what the bees built to connect this comb to the adjacent comb in the nuke, so that when it gets handled roughly by me or one of my employees, the combs are not all shaking all over the place, mashing bees as they go. Okay, so, and these are easier to see, the eggs that are deposited in this comb, particularly over here on this edge, because the depth of these cells is not full depth. Okay, so you really ought to be able to see eggs if you're having a hard time.
Yes, he does. So what is the process?
The process?
You said that takes about 3 days for the
The
eggs
embryo
to turn
to
into
a larva.
And
And
how
then
long-
about 6 days spent in the larval stages, all right? And then 12 days spent in capped brood, okay? Which is where metamorphosis happens,
Okay.
where the pupa, the pupal stage, metamorphosis, the transformation from the larval morphology to the adult morphology, all right?
So if it's
So
skin and comes out fresh.
Think about that. So what sort of a ratio do we have there? 3, 6, 12. Okay, you're doubling the time. Okay, so if the queen is laying the way she's supposed to all out, which happens in the spring and during the honey flow, you ought to have a ratio of eggs to larva to brood that is proportional to those developmental phases. Okay, and if you don't, then you can assess when did the queen start laying, when did she stop laying. It takes some experience, but with you having success there?
Yeah, well, seeing the larvae, I'm trying to see the eggs before the larvae.
Okay. Over here in these cells
Yep.
that are not even full depth, there's some eggs deposited right in here. If you can see those, you might find those easier to see.
There you go, son.
All right. This has been all the way around.
Yes, it's down.
So there's eggs, and then the larvae, they don't seal up,
No,
and then when the larvae get to a certain stage, they seal them?
that's right. The larvae spin a cocoon. Okay.
Oh,
Okay, and the bees put the capping on, and that's how that goes down.
So if you have the brood box frames that are deep,
Mm-hmm.
which come like that,
Mm-hmm.
then you have the shorter ones.
Mm-hmm.
When you're transferring or changing out the short ones for the long ones, how do you do that? Just
I
put it
wouldn't
together?
actually do any changing out. What I would do is wait until your colony needs a super. Okay, so your modified depth or shallow depth colony, whatever it is full
Yeah.
of bees and brood, and then put a deep on top of it,
Okay.
and the queen will naturally move up.
Okay.
Okay, and one of the things that I hope you'll appreciate by the time the lesson is done, if you don't already, is that thermoregulation is a big part of what governs how colonies grow and overwinter and expand. okay? Queens will always move up much faster than they'll move down because the colony has to keep the brood nest at 91 degrees Fahrenheit, even during cold weather. Otherwise, the brood will perish. So
How do
they'd
they do
rather
that?
they'd rather go up because that's where the heat's going to go anyway. Going down makes it really difficult for the bees. They have to be a really strong hive, and they can only move down slowly so that they can cover the brood and heat it as it's growing.
Is this the size of, if we're buying a nuke from you, is this the size we're getting?
Right. It's like 4 combs of bees in brood, and this one's a little on the small side. There's not as much honey in this nuke as I'd like for there to be. Okay, that's why it's not down there among the others that are being handed out right now.
So you bring a feeder with the nuke?
You get a feeder with the nuke.
Where do you put the feeder? Can you show us sometime?
Yeah. This is not the only thing we're going to look at by any
And I are
means.
both going to be doing the transfer into a brand new one for me.
Yeah.
Okay. We can think about that transfer as we work today, and we can even come back and do it. Do a dry run if you want. All right, so what would I do if I was trying to stimulate this colony or make it grow faster? What could I do for it? I could give it some food, okay? I do think that's one of the things that's constrained them right now, is that there's no honey flow out here in Dripping Springs. In fact, a lot of my colonies are in really rough shape because the honey flow should have started by now, and I haven't fed them for about 6 weeks. And they don't have as much honey as they ought to. So if I was going to try to improve the condition of this nuke, I would give it some food. Okay?
You mean
And
by
can-
just some
Sugar syrup.
water?
Right. There's room, but barely room to put a feeder inside here, right? So I could do that.